I bolted upright in bed, heart hammering against my ribs. The red digits of the bedside clock glared 3:14 a.m. My skin was clammy with cold sweat, another recurrence of the dream. I sat there in the dark, catching my breath, trying not to wake the person sleeping beside me. Beside me, my wife stirred faintly but did not wake. I let out a silent sigh of relief. These nightmares had a tendency to manifest as mumbled curses or thrashing limbs, and the last thing I wanted was to have to explain why I might be shouting profanities in my sleep. I ran a trembling hand through my damp hair. The dream was always the same. I'd find myself alone in our living room, an empty whiskey bottle on the coffee table and a loaded pistol in my hand. In the dream, I would raise that cold steel to my temple after screaming curses into the void. Curses aimed at the two people who destroyed my life. I'd be a split second from pulling the trigger when I'd jolt awake, sweating and shaking, my mind racing with rage and pain that even consciousness couldn't fully chase away. Even now, fully awake, my heart still pounded with residual fury. I closed my eyes, willing the images to fade. Her face etched with guilt, his smug smile, images burned into my memory by betrayal. They say time heals all wounds. I doubt whoever coined that phrase ever had their soul immolated by the twin fires of adultery and deceit. 2 years had passed since my world came crashing down, and though I had salvaged a new life from the wreckage, the wound still ached in the dead of night. At least the nightmares had grown less frequent. What used to haunt me weekly had dwindled to once every couple of months. I carefully slipped out of bed and padded down the hall to the kitchen. After splashing my face with cold water, I stood in the darkened house, letting the stillness calm me. My life now is a far cry from what it was. I survived the storm. Some might even say I came out better on the other side, but that journey through hell left its scars, and the echoes of what happened still reverberate in my dreams. To fully understand what I endured, and what I did in response, I have to take you back to where it all began. Back to the day when a seemingly happy man discovered just how fragile his world truly was. Chapter 1. Shattered Trust. In hindsight, the year 2023 was the beginning of the end of my old life. My name is Daniel Jacobs. I was 38 years old that year, a high school history teacher in San Diego, and by all accounts, I had what many would call a picture-perfect life. I was married to my wife Rachel for almost a decade. We owned a comfortable home in a family-friendly neighborhood, and we were the proud parents of two adopted children, Ethan, who was 8, and Sophie, 5. Our marriage had weathered its share of stresses, but we always emerged stronger, or so I believed. The greatest challenge we faced early on was my infertility. After a year of trying for a baby with no success, a doctor confirmed the heartbreaking truth. I had a near-zero sperm count. Medically sterile, they said. I was devastated, convinced I had failed my wife, but Rachel was my rock. She hugged me, told me it didn't matter, and insisted that we were what mattered, not DNA. Together, we embraced adoption. And oh, how joyful we were when we brought Ethan home, and later little Sophie. By 2023, we felt blessed. We had our children, our love, our health. If there was any lingering sorrow about not having a biological child, I thought we had long put it to rest. Looking back, there were small signs that year that all was not as solid as I assumed. Rachel had taken a new job in 2022, switching from a corporate career to teaching 3rd grade at Sunnydale Academy, an elementary school. She was passionate about it and threw herself into the work. I was proud of her. We often bonded over being educators, sharing funny student stories at dinner. But as the fall semester of 2023 rolled on, I noticed Rachel working longer hours, coming home later and more exhausted. She mentioned some big curriculum project that was stressing her out, plus mentoring meetings with her school principal, who she said was guiding her since she was relatively new to teaching. I didn't think much of it. If anything, I admired her dedication. Still, there were odd moments. More than once, I caught her smiling at her phone and tucking it away hastily when I entered the room. Once, I came up behind her while she was texting, and she practically jumped. When I gently asked if something was going on, she laughed it off and said I was paranoid, and that she was just coordinating lesson plans with colleagues. Her tone was light, but I sensed an undercurrent of tension. I brushed it aside. After all, trust is the foundation of a good marriage, right? I trusted Rachel completely. We loved each other and had been through so much. What could possibly come between us now? That illusion came crashing down on a chilly evening in late November 2023. I remember every detail of that night. We had finished dinner, and the kids were in the living room, engrossed in a cartoon. I went into the kitchen, expecting to find Rachel cleaning up as usual, but instead found her standing rigidly by the sink, staring out the window into the dark. "Rach, everything okay?" I asked, stepping closer. Under the overhead light, I could see her shoulders were trembling slightly. She turned around, and my heart sank. Her eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. In her hands, she clutched something small and white. I recognized it immediately, a home pregnancy test. My mind couldn't process it. Why would she? She answered my unspoken question by holding the test out toward me. Two bright pink lines were visible in the little result window. "I'm pregnant, Dan," she said, her voice very small. For a second, it felt like the floor tilted. I stared at her, then at the test, then back at her. "Pregnant," I echoed blankly. A tentative, wavering smile flitted across her face. "I know. It's a shock," she said. But miracles happen. The doctor said there was a chance, however small." My mind was whirling. Could it be true? We'd been told my chances of fathering a child were practically zero. But not absolutely zero, a tiny, rational voice said. There was maybe a 1 in 10,000 chance. Had we somehow hit the lottery of fertility? She stepped closer, reaching for my hand. "Isn't it amazing?" she breathed, tears spilling from her eyes. "After all this time, a miracle." I should have felt joyous. This was something I had once prayed for fervently. But as I looked into Rachel's tear-filled eyes, all I felt was a cold, growing dread. Something in her expression wasn't elation or even fear, it was desperation. I gently pulled my hand away from hers. My mouth had gone dry. "How?" I began, my voice hardly above a whisper. "How far along are you?" Her lips parted. Just a few weeks. I only took the test today," she said. We hadn't been intimate in over a month. I was immediately aware of that, even as I struggled to do the mental math. The timing was off. But I pushed that aside and forced a smile that I suspect looked as strained as I felt. This is incredible," I managed to say. My heart hammered painfully against my ribs as I stepped forward and pulled her into an embrace. I felt her relief in the way she melted against me. She started sobbing into my shoulder. Loud, messy sobs. "Oh, thank God," she cried, clinging to me. "I was so scared you'd be angry." I stroked her back, my hand trembling. "Angry? Why would I be angry?" I murmured. On the surface, my words were reassuring. Inside, my thoughts were a storm. Angry? Why should I be angry? Unless there's a reason I should doubt this is my child. She pulled back, looking at me with that anxious, searching expression. I mustered all my willpower to keep my face concerned instead of suspicious. "I guess we should make a doctor's appointment, huh?" I said. She nodded quickly. "Yes, tomorrow. I can call first thing and see if they'll rush me in." Her eagerness for immediate confirmation didn't soothe my fears. We left it at that. Rachel forced another teary smile and went to get the kids ready for bed. I stood in the kitchen for a long minute after she left, my hands curled into fists on the counter as a million thoughts careened through my head. I hated myself for even thinking it. Rachel had stood by me through so much. I had put her on a pedestal of trust. To suspect her of something so unthinkable felt like a betrayal on my part. And yet, the evidence was mounting, impossible to ignore. When my heart finally slowed its wild pounding, I quietly opened the trash can. Amid paper towels and scraps, I found what I was looking for. The crumpled box from a pregnancy test, and beneath it, a receipt from a drugstore dated 2 days ago. The receipt listed a pregnancy test kit and a bottle of prenatal vitamins. She had bought prenatal vitamins before she even told me. My stomach lurched. My mind was whirling. She suspected she was pregnant 2 days ago and was already taking vitamins. Why wait to tell me, unless she was afraid? Unless she had spoken to someone else first, like the real father. I nearly retched right there. But a cold clarity was settling in as puzzle pieces clicked brutally into place. Late nights at work, secretive texts, her principal guiding her, a sudden pregnancy that shouldn't have been possible. The terrifying realization that I might be holding not a miracle but evidence of betrayal was creeping into my mind. I tried to reject it. This was my faithful, loving wife, Never in a million years did I think Rachel could do something like this. Maybe I'm wrong, I told myself desperately. Maybe there's some other explanation, but deep down I already knew. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I lay beside her in bed, rigid and wide awake, while she slept with the ease of someone who believes, or hopes, her secret is safe. My thoughts were a raging sea. I knew accusations alone meant nothing. I needed proof, and if my worst fears were true, I needed a plan. I ended that night not in our marital bed, but in my car, parked on a quiet street a few blocks away. Only there, alone in the dark, did I finally allow myself to scream. I pounded the steering wheel until my hands were numb, releasing a torrent of anguish and fury that had been building all evening. The betrayal had broken something in me. The man who eventually returned home in the early dawn was not the same naive husband who had awoken that morning. By the time the sun crept over the horizon, I had formulated the bones of a plan, cold, methodical, and fueled by a righteous wrath I never knew I possessed. Thus began my campaign of revenge. The next morning, heart thudding in my chest, I drove to Sunnydale Academy under the pretense of dropping off lunch for Rachel. In reality, I wanted to see him with my own eyes. I had a sickeningly strong hunch who the father of that unborn baby was. Andrew Turner, her principal. I caught him in the hallway before classes started. He greeted me with a polite professional smile, but I swear I saw a glint of nervous recognition in his eyes. We exchanged a few meaningless pleasantries about the school year. All the while, rage churned inside me. Up close, this man seemed so normal, friendly even. It made me despise him more. He had no idea that I knew, and I left without tipping my hand. But as fate would have it, Rachel came around the corner moments later and saw me there chatting with him. The flicker of pure panic on her face spoke volumes. In that instant, her guilt was confirmed 100 times over. That evening, after the kids were asleep, I cornered Rachel in our kitchen, my voice deadly calm as I asked, "How long?" She knew exactly what I meant. Her eyes went wide, then flooded with tears. Truth be told, some part of her seemed almost relieved as the secret tumbled free. "Since this past summer," she whispered, collapsing into a chair. I never meant for it to happen. It was after those teacher workshops. We grew close. He was so supportive and I was feeling, I don't know, lonely. It just happened. Just happened? I echoed with quiet fury. You accidentally fell on him, is that it? She flinched at my vulgarity but pressed on, rambling through her tears. It wasn't often, I swear, Dan. I told him it was wrong. I tried to stop it. Not hard enough, apparently. I shot back, my nails biting into my palms. She sobbed into her hands. He was there for me in ways I thought you weren't. I realize now that was in my head, but at the time I felt unappreciated and he just took advantage of that. Of me. I almost laughed at her attempt to shift blame. So it's his fault now? Fresh tears streamed down her face. No, I mean, yes, it's both of our faults. I won't excuse myself. I am so sorry, Dan. I've destroyed everything, haven't I? I said nothing, jaw clenched. She crawled from the chair and reached for my hand, but I recoiled. Don't. My voice was ice. Why the pregnancy, Rachel? Were you going to try to pass it off as mine? She shook her head frantically. I don't know. I panicked when I found out. Part of me wanted to pretend it could be a miracle. That maybe you'd accept it and we could raise the baby and forget all this. A hollow, bitter laugh escaped me. Forget? You honestly thought I wouldn't notice that the child couldn't be mine? She was beyond coherence, rocking on the floor. I wasn't thinking. I was so scared. I didn't want to lose you. I love you, Dan. I do. He meant nothing to me, I swear. It was just a stupid fling. Stupid, I repeated softly, the rage in me white hot. Yes, the stupidest mistake of your life. And mine was ever trusting you. At that, she broke completely, wailing apologies over and over. But it was far too late for apologies. I told her, in a voice that barely sounded like my own, that our marriage was over. There was no yelling at that point. My words came out deathly quiet, and far more terrifying because of it. Rachel collapsed on the tile floor, sobbing hysterically and begging for another chance. I left her there, her pleas ringing in my ears, and locked myself in the guest room. That night, I hardly slept. My decision was made. I would divorce Rachel, and I would make sure Andrew Turner paid dearly for what he had done. Neither of them would get off easy, not after destroying my family. Chapter 2. Gathering Evidence. I didn't let grief or fury paralyze me. In the days immediately following my wife's confession, I turned my energy toward two things: protecting my kids and preparing to utterly dismantle the lives of the people who betrayed me. First, I quietly consulted a divorce attorney. I wanted to understand my options and position. California is a no-fault state, but my lawyer assured me that evidence of infidelity could still provide leverage in custody and settlement discussions. With that in mind, I began gathering proof. I combed through Rachel's phone records and found countless calls and texts to a number I recognized as Andrew Turner's. Late-night durations, weekend timestamps while I'd been out with the kids, each one a dagger of confirmation. I pulled our credit card statements and spotted suspicious charges. A hotel booking on an evening I'd been away at a teacher's conference, extra lunches billed near her school on days she'd claimed to be grading in the classroom. Piece by piece, the full picture of their deceit came into focus, fueling my resolve. Armed with a growing pile of evidence, I set my plan in motion. Revenge, to me, would be most satisfying if it was thorough and left no loose ends. Confronting Rachel was only the beginning. Turner needed to face consequences too, and I realized I had an unexpected ally in that cause: Monica Turner, his wife. I remembered Monica from the few times we'd crossed paths at school events. A polite, pretty woman who had spoken warmly of her husband when we chatted over punch. The thought that she was likely suffering a similar betrayal ignited a spark of grim kinship in me. She deserved to know the truth, and selfishly, I knew that involving her could double the pain for Andrew and shield me from any sympathy he might garner. Hell hath no fury like two spouses scorned. It wasn't hard to find her contact information. A quick search online turned up her cell number. We'd once been part of the same PTA email thread, which included phone contacts. The hard part was steeling myself to actually dial it. One evening, 2 days after my confrontation with Rachel, I sat in my quiet living room, my phone in hand. Upstairs, the kids were asleep, blissfully unaware that their world was about to change. My finger hovered over Monica's number. How do you tell a stranger that her husband impregnated your wife? In the end, I decided a blunt approach was best. I sent her a simple message first, identifying myself and stating, "I'm sorry to bring this to you, but I have reason to believe my wife Rachel and your husband Andrew have been having an affair. If you're willing, I'd like to discuss what I know." I added my phone number and hit send. The reply came faster than I expected. Instead of a text, my phone rang scarcely a minute later. Monica's trembling voice answered my wary hello with, "This is Monica. I just got your message. Please tell me everything." That phone call was one of the most emotionally raw conversations I've ever had. At first, Monica was in disbelief, her words laced with panic and a desperate hope that I was mistaken. But as I gently laid out the facts, my wife's pregnancy, her confession, the timeline of the affair, I heard Monica's breath hitch and then turn into sobs. In between tears, she shared her side. She'd had suspicions for a couple of months. Andrew had grown distant, and there were unexplained late nights and trips. She'd even asked him point blank if he was seeing someone else, and he'd indignantly denied it, claiming work stress. "He lied to my face," she said bitterly. I could almost see their expression hardening through the phone. "He lied to both of us," I replied, trying to keep my own voice steady. "But now we know the truth." Monica asked me question after question: how I confronted Rachel, what exactly was said, how long it had been going on. I answered as honestly as I could. There was a weary, shocked silence on her end when we finished exchanging information. Then I said carefully, "Monica, I have a proposition, and I completely understand if you're not comfortable with it." She sniffled. "Go on." "I intend to make them face the consequences. All of them. I'm not a forgiving man in this situation." My tone was harsher than I intended, but she didn't recoil. "I'm right there with you," she said quietly. Gone was the initial shock in her voice. Now it brimmed with anger. I took a breath. "I think we should work together. Coordinate how we confront them publicly or legally. It would blindside them. They won't be able to play us off against each other or twist the story." A faint, humorless chuckle came through. "Team up, huh?" The irony isn't lost on me. Despite everything, the corner of my mouth twitched in a half smile. "Strange times make for strange alliances." Her voice strengthened. All right, I'm in. What do you have in mind? And so the blueprint of our revenge formed. We decided the most impactful moment to expose them would be when they were together, with an audience of peers if possible. Fortunately, an opportunity was imminent. The Academy's annual winter holiday party was only a week away, a Friday night event at a local banquet hall, where staff and significant others mingled freely. Andrew and Rachel would both be there, likely even find moments to sneak off together. If we could confront them at the party, it would be devastatingly public and unforgettable. To set the stage, I made arrangements to ensure Rachel felt secure that night. I told her I was going to take our kids to visit my parents that weekend, leaving Friday afternoon and returning Sunday. I implied that I needed space to think and that the kids deserved a trip to Grandma's to keep their routine normal. Rachel, who had been tiptoeing around me full of remorse, agreed without protest. I could see the pain in her eyes when I left with the children that Friday, but also a spark of something else, possibly relief, thinking she might see Andrew without me around. The thought made me sick, but it meant our ruse was working. Meanwhile, Monica had her own preparations. She calmly told Andrew that she was taking their two kids to her sister's for a girls' weekend out of town. He apparently barely questioned it, likely grateful to have the freedom. We knew he and Rachel would likely attempt to meet after the faculty party, if not during it. Our goal was to catch them in a compromising position and confront them under the harsh light of truth. Friday arrived. Before driving my children to my parents', I quietly stashed a small voice recorder in the living room and another in our bedroom, set to capture whatever might happen in my absence that evening. It was probably overkill, but I wanted every scrap of evidence documented. By 8 p.m., I was parking a couple of blocks away from the banquet hall where the Academy's party was in full swing. I'd dropped the kids off safely with my mom and recruited a friend to babysit them overnight, explaining I had something urgent to deal with. The stern look my mother gave me told me she suspected more than I let on. Monica sat in my passenger seat, her face pale but determined. In the back seat, hidden under a blanket, lay our tools, a digital video camera and a spare phone for photos. We had agreed to strike at around 9:30 when the party was lively and people had had a few drinks. That's when guards would be down. Our plan? I would enter first, scanning for our spouses. Monica would follow shortly after, staying out of sight until the pivotal moment. At 9:15, I got a text from a coworker of Rachel's, one who was in the dark about everything, but had agreed to a small favor for me. "They're here," it read simply, meaning Rachel and Andrew were at the party. Showtime. Monica gave me a resolute nod, and I exited the car, heart hammering. I slipped into the venue, a hotel ballroom, trying to stay inconspicuous in the crowd of chatting teachers and clinking glasses. It wasn't hard to spot them. Near a decorated Christmas tree, I saw Rachel in a green dress and Andrew in a charcoal suit. They stood a bit apart from the clusters of others, speaking in low tones. At one point, I saw him touch her elbow lightly. She glanced around nervously, perhaps afraid someone might notice the familiarity. Little did they know, the real threat had just walked in the door. I caught sight of the assistant principal, Mr. Nguyen, near the bar. Perfect. I sidled up to him and struck up small talk, all the while keeping an eye on the cheaters. Nguyen greeted me warmly. He knew me from district functions. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched Andrew slip something to Rachel. A key card to a hotel room, maybe. She nodded subtly. They were making plans for after the party, I surmised. Over my dead body, I thought. By 9:30, I'd maneuvered myself to a spot near the hallway that led to private meeting rooms, the likely route they'd take for a clandestine rendezvous. On cue, Andrew quietly excused himself from a conversation and headed down that corridor. A minute later, Rachel set down her wine glass and followed. I signaled Monica, who had entered and was waiting just outside the ballroom. My pulse raced as we trailed behind Rachel's green dress, disappearing into a side room that looked empty and dark. In one hand, I held the digital camera already recording. In the other, I had my phone ready to snap photos. My throat was dry, adrenaline coursing through me. This was it. I pushed open the door to that room without knocking. The scene that greeted us was exactly as expected. Andrew's arms were around Rachel, his mouth on hers in a deep kiss. The two jerked apart in shock as the door banged against the wall. "What the?" Andrew blurted, wiping his mouth, eyes wide and wild when he saw it was me. Rachel's hands flew to her mouth. "Dan!" I felt strangely calm. I panned the video camera toward them, its red light blinking. "Smile for the camera," I said coldly. Rachel's face crumpled in mortification and fear. Andrew lunged forward as if to grab the device from me. "You son of a—" Before he could finish, another voice cut in sharply. "Move 1 inch closer to him, Andrew, and you'll regret it." Monica stepped into the room, and I saw all the color drain from Andrew's face. Monica?" Rachel backed up against the table, looking like she might faint. "Oh my God." Monica's gaze was laser-focused on her husband. "Surprise," she said, each syllable dripping with contempt. Andrew stammered uselessly, hands hovering in the air. I saw the tendons in his neck strain as he grappled for something to say. Rachel slid down into a chair, sobbing softly. I decided to seize control. With deliberate motions, I pulled a manila envelope from inside my jacket and tossed its contents into the air. Photocopies of phone bills and hotel receipts fluttered like damning confetti around the lovers. I saw one of Rachel's fellow teachers, Ms. Lopez, whip out her phone with an astonished expression, likely capturing a photo or video of this debacle. Others stood frozen, mouths agape, unsure whether to intervene or simply spectate this real-life drama unfolding in their midst. "In case anyone doubts what's been happening," I announced, voice shaking with rage, "here's the proof. Your upstanding principal has been screwing my wife." Gasps and murmurs erupted behind me as a small crowd of partygoers gathered at the doorway. Mr. Nguyen pushed to the front, his expression a mixture of shock and fury. "Dan, let's take this outside," he urged in a low tone, hands raised as if calming a wild animal. I ignored him. My attention was fixed on Andrew and Rachel. Andrew had recovered some of his composure and now attempted to straighten his suit jacket. A pathetic attempt at dignity. "This is a private matter," he barked, falling back on authority out of habit. His voice wavered, undermining the effect. "Private?" Monica echoed, her voice cutting through his like a blade. "You made it very public when you carried on with a married woman, your subordinate, under the nose of the entire community." She stepped forward, and with one swift motion pulled off her wedding ring. In the stunned silence, she flung it at his chest. The ring pinged off the floor and rolled under the table. Monica's voice trembled with wrath. "We're done, Andrew. I'll see you in court." There was a collective intake of breath from the audience. Andrew's face went from ashen to bright red, rage and humiliation contorting his features. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I took a step closer to my wife. Rachel wouldn't even look at me, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "Look at me," I demanded. When she finally lifted her eyes, I saw utter devastation there. I felt a pang, of pity, of loss, but it hardened quickly. "You have nothing to say for yourself except that you're sorry, right?" I snarled. She nodded frantically, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, Dan. I cut her off, turning to Nguyen and the others. "Sorry doesn't cut it. Not for this." My chest heaved. I'd said what I came to say. It was done. Nguyen stepped fully into the room now, placing a hand on Andrew's shoulder with an iron grip. "Mr. Turner, Rachel, my office, now." His voice was low and furious. Clearly, whatever sympathy he had for them was overwhelmed by professional outrage at this public scandal. Andrew hung his head, utterly defeated. Rachel stood on unsteady legs, avoiding everyone's gaze. I had nothing left for either of them. I turned to leave. Monica was already at the door waiting for me, her face a mask of bitter satisfaction and deep pain. We strode out of that room together, through the parted sea of disbelieving colleagues and staff. As I left, I heard the first murmurings. Someone whispering, "Oh my God, did you see?" Another hissing, "I knew something was off." The rumor mill was already churning at full speed, and by morning, their affair would be the only thing anyone had at. Sunnydale talked about. Outside, the winter night was cold and still. I found Monica leaning against a pillar a few paces from the entrance, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. Then the adrenaline crash hit me. My own hands began to tremble, and a shuddering breath escaped my lungs that I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Are you okay?" I managed to ask. Monica gave a wet laugh, wiping a tear that had slid down her cheek. "No, but I will be." Without thinking, I opened my arms. She stepped forward and fell against me, our grief and anger collapsing together. I wrapped her in a tight hug and felt her begin to sob against my shoulder. We stood there a while, two betrayed souls holding each other up under the cold starlight. Finally, she pulled back and wiped her eyes. "What do we do now?" she whispered. I managed a small, grim smile. "Now we start over," I said. "We help each other pick up the pieces." She nodded, a flicker of resolve returning to her tear-stained face. We parted soon after, exchanging one last look of solidarity before going our separate ways into the night. In that shared glance, a silent understanding passed between us. We had been broken, but we would not remain so. Chapter 4. Aftermath. In the days and weeks that followed that explosive night, I moved forward with a grim resolve. I returned to my parents' house before dawn, slipping in to hold my sleeping children and reassure myself that not everything in my life was broken. As I watched Ethan and Sophie breathe softly in their beds, I swore to myself that I would rebuild our lives from the wreckage, stronger and safer than before. True to my word, I filed for divorce immediately. Rachel did not contest it. Perhaps she knew there was no point, or perhaps guilt simply crushed any fight out of her. Our divorce was finalized in a matter of a few months. Citing her adultery and the evidence I'd gathered, my lawyer negotiated a favorable agreement. I was awarded primary custody of our children and exclusive ownership of our house. Rachel, with no leg to stand on, agreed to a settlement that was decidedly one-sided in my favor. We severed our financial ties and she waived any claim to spousal support, likely too ashamed to ask for anything from me. We had one final brief encounter at a divorce mediation session. She was a shell of the confident woman I once knew, eyes downcast, answering questions in a meek monotone. When my attorney handed over the custody agreement granting me primary guardianship, Rachel signed it without protest. She murmured a choked, "I'm sorry," across the table, eyes brimming. I said nothing in return. There was nothing left to say. She moved out officially long before the ink was dry on the papers. For a brief time, she rented a small apartment across town, attempting to maintain some presence for the kids. But facing the community became unbearable for her. In our social circles and at her workplace, the story quietly spread. The beloved teacher who cheated on her husband with her boss. Small-town gossip can be merciless, even in a city the size of San Diego. And the whispers followed her everywhere. Facing whispers and cold stares in the hallways, Rachel resigned from her teaching position before the district could formally discipline her. A substitute was assigned to finish her class's semester, and her principal, the interim one, after Andrew's departure, accepted her resignation with thinly veiled disgust. Not long after, Rachel left town entirely. She moved to Arizona where her older sister lived, hoping for a fresh start away from prying eyes. I was relieved. It spared our children the confusion of shuffling between two homes nearby and encountering their mother in awkward moments. Instead, her visits with Ethan and Sophie became a bi-monthly affair. She would drive or fly in, spend a weekend, then disappear again. Over time, even those grew infrequent. I think facing the kids, seeing the pain in their eyes, the way our son acted cold and our daughter cried when she left, was more punishment than she could bear. Telling Ethan and Sophie that their mother and I were separating was one of the hardest tasks I've ever faced. I did it on a quiet Sunday afternoon, gently explaining that Mommy and Daddy would be living in different houses and that it wasn't their fault. Sophie, too young to fully grasp it, burst into tears and clung to my leg, asking if Mommy didn't love us anymore. Ethan, on the other hand, went very silent. Then, with the brutal honesty of a child, he asked if Mommy had done something bad. I struggled for words, eventually settling on, "Mommy made a big mistake and it hurt all of us." Even at 8, he seemed to understand more than I expected. He blinked hard, nodded, and his face crumpled in a mix of anger and sadness that no child should have to feel. We held each other on the couch for a long time that day, all three of us crying in our own way. At first, the kids asked constantly where their mother was and when she would be back. I did my best to reassure them with gentle lies that she loved them very much, but had to live somewhere else for a while. It never truly satisfied them. They sensed the fracture in our lives. They overheard and unsaid. There were some angry outbursts, especially from Ethan. He was old enough to feel betrayed by her absence. Therapy helped, as did the consistency and love from my parents and me. Over time, the questions about Mommy dwindled. By the end of that first year, the kids seemed to accept that it was just the three of us. As for Andrew Turner, his downfall was swift and well-deserved. He resigned from his position as principal under immense pressure from the district. Officially, the school board cited unspecified personal misconduct, but word quietly spread among faculty and parents about the real reason. His career in education was effectively finished. No school would entrust him with leadership again after such a scandal. His personal life fared no better. True to her word, Monica divorced him. Unlike my situation, she didn't have any inclination toward mercy. She secured a razor-sharp attorney and went for blood. Rumor has it Andrew forfeited a significant chunk of his assets in the split. House, savings, even a portion of his retirement. Monica won primary custody of their two children who, as I understand, want little to do with their father now. A cheating scandal involving a parent is hard on kids, especially older ones who fully grasp the betrayal. I'm told his teenage son refuses to speak to him, and his younger daughter only sees him under supervision. In the span of a year, Andrew lost his job, his wife, the daily presence of his kids, and most of his wealth. I'd be lying if I said that knowledge didn't give me a grim sense of satisfaction. I normally don't delight in others' misery, but for him, I made an exception. He earned every ounce of it. I won't pretend it was easy to let go of the anger. In the first months, it clung to me like a shadow. I'd find myself seething at random hours, replaying arguments in my head, fantasizing about further retributions that, thankfully, I never pursued. But day by day, that toxic fire dimmed. My children's laughter began to drown it out. Small moments of peace began to replace the vengeful scripts in my mind. I realized I didn't have to forgive what Rachel and Andrew did. Perhaps I never will. But I did have to release myself from constantly dwelling on it. For my own sanity and for my kids, I chose to focus on the future rather than the past. Months passed. The anger that once roared like a wildfire in my chest gradually cooled to embers. I no longer went to sleep with thoughts of revenge. I had already exacted that. Instead, I went to sleep exhausted from helping with homework and packing lunches, and surprisingly content in the simple assurance that I had survived. By the time a year had rolled around since D-Day, as I bitterly came to label the day of discovery and confrontation, I felt more at peace than I ever expected. The nightmares that plagued me started to fade. I could go whole days without thinking of Rachel or Andrew at all. Sometimes, when I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, I was surprised by the man looking back. He looked like me, but there was a hardness around the eyes that hadn't been there before, a result of weathering a storm and coming out the other side. I had been tested, and I had not broken. In fact, life was starting to look up in ways I couldn't have predicted. I didn't think much about the future of my love life in that first year. My focus was the kids and myself. Still, life has a way of surprising you. People came out of the woodwork offering support. Neighbors dropping off casseroles, fellow teachers inviting me to adult get-togethers to take my mind off things. I went a few times, slowly remembering how to enjoy myself as just Dan, not Dan and Rachel, and then there was Monica. In the aftermath, we kept in touch sporadically. Initially, it was to update each other on legal proceedings. She'd text me when her divorce was final. I'd let her know when mine was. There was a strange comfort in talking to the one person who truly understood the depth of what I'd been through. After all, we'd fought the same battle side by side. We didn't rush anything. In fact, both of us were wary at first. Two people burned by love's betrayal, tiptoeing around the possibility of romance. But gentle days turned into warm nights of conversation. I remember our first tentative kiss. It happened on my porch after she had come over to drop off a batch of cookies her daughter baked for my kids. The moment was sweet, hesitant, and utterly perfect. From then on, we slowly, cautiously let each other in. About 6 months after everything went down, Monica and I met up for coffee. It was supposed to be a quick check-in between two wounded souls. It turned into a 2-hour conversation. We talked about everything. Our kids, our plans, the absurdity of suddenly being single in our late 30s, and the roller coaster of emotions that comes with betrayal. We laughed a bit. We teared up a bit. When we parted, I realized I felt lighter than I had in ages. That became an occasional habit, meeting Monica to chat and compare notes on putting our lives back together. I didn't overthink it at the time, and neither did she. It was just good not to feel alone in it. Little did I know those conversations were the seedlings of something neither of us expected to find again. Happiness, and maybe even hope for new love. Epilogue. 2 years later, sunlight filtered gently through the curtains of my bedroom as I slowly awoke to the sound of soft breathing beside me. For a moment, I simply lay there, reflecting on how much my life had changed. Gone were the days of waking in panic or loneliness. Instead, I felt warmth, contentment, and love. I turned my head on the pillow to gaze at Monica, still asleep at my side. In sleep, her face looked peaceful, a slight smile curving her lips as if her dreams were sweet. My wife, a word that still felt new and extraordinary to me, sensed my movement and stirred, her hand instinctively reaching across the bed until it found me. Even in slumber, we gravitated toward each other. Gently, I brushed a few strands of her auburn hair away from her face. I couldn't help but smile. If someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be here, remarried to an incredible woman who had once been a stranger, our lives interwoven in a way neither of us could have imagined, I would have thought them crazy. But here we were. After everything, Monica and I found solace and hope in one another. What started as shared pain and understanding grew, slowly and naturally, into friendship, then affection, and eventually a deep, abiding love. We took our time, cautious with our hearts, but love has a way of healing wounds we thought would never mend. Gentle friendship turned into something more. Our first tentative dates were often just playdates with our kids at the park or long talks over coffee that stretched past midnight. Each of us was testing the waters, afraid to jump, until we realized we weren't falling alone. We had someone there to catch us. We didn't know for sure until the very end whether we were ready, but gradually, trust grew where once there was only hurt. I remember our first actual grown-up date, dinner at a seaside restaurant. We were both nervous as teenagers, laughing at ourselves. By dessert, I think we both knew something special was blooming. We even had help from fate and our kids. Just last week, I overheard Sophie telling her school friend that she has two mommies now, one who lives far away, and Miss Monica, who lives with us and makes the best pancakes. Hearing that filled my eyes with tears of gratitude. Monica and I married quietly at the courthouse 6 months ago, with Ethan as my best man and her daughter as the flower girl. It was a simple, perfect day. Now I wake up beside her, and life is good. Our house is often chaotic, full of chatter, laughter, the occasional teenage grumble, but it is alive and whole. In a way, we forged a new family from the broken pieces of our old ones, and it's stronger than I ever imagined. My two, Ethan and Sophie, absolutely adore Monica. Watching her read bedtime stories to Sophie or cheer at Ethan's soccer games with all the enthusiasm of a proud mom. I know I couldn't have asked for a better figure to help guide them through life. For their part, her children have come to accept me as well. Her son, at first wary and protective of his mother, realized I wasn't here to replace his dad, only to care for his mom and be another person in his corner. Her daughter, younger and craving stability, warmed up to me quickly. She often slips her hand into mine when we all go out for ice cream, as if I've been her second dad forever. It's not lost on any of us how unusual our story is. Sometimes when the kids are all busy and the house is momentarily quiet, Monica will catch my eye and say, "Thank God for that awful day." I know exactly what she means. If we hadn't been betrayed so terribly, we never would have found each other. We took something poisonous and together distilled from it a medicine that healed us both. I leaned over now and pressed a light kiss to Monica's forehead. She sighed contentedly and her eyes fluttered open. Those warm brown eyes that first met mine across a coffee shop table when we were both drowning in sorrow. "Good morning, handsome," she whispered, her voice husky with sleep. She curled into me, wrapping an arm around my chest. The simple intimacy of that gesture still fills me with gratitude. "Good morning, beautiful," I replied, meaning it. I kissed the wedding band on her finger, a habit I'd picked up as if to assure myself this is real. She followed my gaze to the ring and smiled. "You know, you don't have to keep checking. I'm not going anywhere." "I know," I murmured, meeting her smile with one of my own. "But old habits die hard." Her expression grew tender. "They do. But we've made some pretty wonderful new habits, haven't we?" Before I could answer, a sudden thundering of footsteps sounded in the hallway. A chorus of voices, some high and young, others cracking into adolescence, called through the door. "Dad, Mom, are you awake?" That was Ethan, always the ringleader. It's pancake day, Sophie's little voice added excitedly. Saturday morning pancake tradition, a carryover from my old life that has become a beloved ritual for our blended family. Monica and I exchanged a laughing glance. 5 more minutes, she called out, trying to sound stern. A muffled, dramatic groan came back through the door. Hurry up, we're starving, her son added, with no real urgency, just teenage theatrics. We'll be right there, I chuckled. Satisfied with that, we heard the gaggle of children scamper off toward the kitchen, arguing amicably about chocolate chips versus blueberries. Monica propped herself up on her elbow, looking down at me. Our little circus awaits, she said, eyes shining with happiness. Can you believe this is our life now? I reached up to caress her cheek. Sometimes it feels like a dream, I admitted. A few years ago, I thought I'd never smile like this again. And now you're stuck with a house full of messy, loud kids and a woman who loves you more than you'll ever know, she finished teasingly. I felt a familiar warmth in my chest, joy. I wouldn't trade it for anything, I said softly. We shared a kiss, sweet and lingering, before reluctantly throwing back the covers to face the eager mob. As we headed out of the bedroom hand in hand, I took one last mental snapshot of the scene. Sunlight flooding our cozy room, Monica by my side, and the sounds of children giggling downstairs. It was the portrait of a life rebuilt, a life hard won and fully appreciated. Betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but standing here now, I understood something fundamental. Sometimes life's cruelest endings lead to the most beautiful new beginnings. I lost a marriage built on lies, only to gain a partnership grounded in truth and mutual respect. I endured the darkest of nights, and it led me to a brighter dawn. Monica squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back gently. No, I wouldn't trade any of this for the world. Dan, she said, pausing in the doorway to smile up at me. I love you. I love you too, I replied, meaning it with every fiber of my being. With that, we stepped forward together into the day, ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. Grateful, unbroken, and victorious. This is the end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.